So joining me today on Restore Black podcast is Elliot Rae. Elliot is not only a courageous husband, father, speaker, author, advocate, and social change maker, but also he's one of the UK's most prominent voices on fatherhood, masculinity, and men's mental health. As the founder of the pioneering parenting platform Music, Football, Fatherhood, Elliot has been hailed as the Mumsnet for dads by the BBC. This groundbreaking platform serves as a forum for open conversations on fatherhood, masculinity, and mental health, offering a supportive community for dads to explore topics such as loss and mental well-being. Inspired by his own journey of being diagnosed with postpartum PTSD following the traumatic birth of his daughter, Elliot channeled his experiences into writing and community building. His book, Dad, an Amazon top 10 bestseller, is a poignant collection of narratives that challenge traditional notions of masculinity and celebrate the diverse voices of modern fatherhood. Now, Elliot, I'm going to stop right there because I could go on and on of all the accolades that's been given to you. And so I want to once again just take time to welcome you to the platform, Restore Black. And so let's take it from here. I'd like to start by asking you about, to talk to us about your experience of the birth of your daughter or leading up to that. But I want you to start with letting us know who Elliot was, and I'm using the word was, because I know what happened had to be a very life-changing experience for you. So I wonder if you could tell us a bit about who Elliot was before the traumatic event. You know, if you can tell us about your childhood experiences and
Certainly. And thank you for the introduction. I felt quite emotional listening to that. I'm not quite sure why,
Okay.
but when someone reads your life back to you and puts it in their own words as well, it's quite a surreal experience. That was very nice. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Who Elliot was. I've always been quite a free spirit, still am. I am an explorer. I like to live life to the fullest. I'm a big believer that there's an endless amount of opportunities and discovery to find as long as we put ourselves out there to find what the universe and what the world has to offer for us.
Yes.
So I've always been that way, and I've channeled that through different means. At the time of having my daughter, I just, we were just married. My wife's Lenny, he's in the other room over there.
Yeah.
We lived in Walthamstow. We were in a band together. She's an amazing singer-songwriter. I played the bass and produced the music. So our love of creativity and music brought us together. We would tour around the country, make music together in the studio. We had some success in our music career. And I was a free spirit, a person who had lots of friends, loved to socialize, and really enjoying my life as much as I can, as well as working very hard. So my parents came to the UK in the 60s. My dad from Grenada, my mum from St. Vincent. And my dad moved just after England won the World Cup. He moved to Wembley.
Wow, and they haven't won it since. Is that right?
Haven't won it since. So maybe he needs to go and come back again. I don't know. But yeah, he moved to Wembley. That's where I grew up. And I had a very multicultural upbringing. I really am glad for where I grew up, actually, in West London, because everyone lived there in regards to race and class. So I had an amazing upbringing in that way. And before, diversity was a word, I guess the school I went to in the area I grew up in really offered that. So I think that shaped my experiences and who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And as you mentioned, who you are changes when you go through a big life event. You know, I
Yeah.
think parenting changes you anyway,
Yeah.
but our particular start to our journey as parents has defined my life, I think, since then,
Mm.
in a personal and professional way.
Yes.
And my wife always says your mess is your message.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for me, that's definitely the case
Yeah.
in regards to that mess has given me a message.
Yeah.
And I've been able to do some really nice things off the back of that, not only to help other people,
Mm.
but you know, my own life, I've experienced some amazing opportunities off the back of the work I have done
Mm.
advocating for fatherhood
Yeah.
and the evolution of masculinity.
Yes. And have you, before the birth of your daughter, um, ever struggled with mental health difficulties? Any other trauma that you may have experienced before your daughter's birth?
So I would say not really. No, I mean there were difficult parts of my life
Mm.
where when I look back, I was definitely affected by. But in regards to, can I point to a period of life and say I felt like I was depressed at that point?
Mm.
Probably not. So yes, difficult times. You know, as a growing up as a young black boy in London, it's very easy to get caught up in the wrong things, and I definitely did. And there were one particular example that happened, which was kind of a threat to my life ultimately. And I think the months after that, I was definitely in a state of shock, and really needed friends and family around me to lift me up. But I can't look back and say I had any serious mental health problems or struggled with depression or anything
Yeah.
actually.
Can you say a bit more about this threat to your life? Because that sounds quite um, difficult too when you say there was a threat to your life. Are you able to say a bit more about that?
Yeah, I can. So and it might be a bit triggering for the listeners because it's yeah, quite a moment that I think is difficult to listen to. But you know, I was definitely around some of the wrong people, I would say. Um, and had a lot of friends, and sometimes you realize when you're younger, a lot of your friends aren't actually your friends.
Right.
And there were a lot of things going on. I'm not saying I'm completely innocent, but yeah, definitely was hanging around with the wrong people. And there was one particular example. I got into an argument with some other guys, and they pulled a gun out and put it to my head. And I knew the person who was doing it, and he was a very serious person who I think had done things in the past,
Mm.
and got into a fight. And then I ended up getting into my car, driving the wrong way home, ending up in Acton, um, eventually going home, going to A&E, and feeling feeling shocked, not just because of what had happened. That actually wasn't what got to me. It was
Yes.
the fact that I knew the people who had done it.
Right.
And at the time, there were a lot of people from my school there as well. So it was quite embarrassing. So for a long time, I felt quite alienated and
Mm.
isolated,
Yeah.
and betrayed. And that took a bit of time to kind of get over.
Yes.
But I'm lucky I've got great cousins and friends who were able to support me through that period.
Yes.
And I was like 19 at the time. And now it's really interesting because I look at PTSD with young black boys. Well, you know,
Mhm.
doing a little bit of research, I'm sure you've read up
Yeah.
on how being involved in certain activities on the roads and whatnot can really affect you
Yes.
in a way that maybe we haven't looked at before. Because a
Absolutely.
lot of young people or people who have been through that kind of experience, who may have been stabbed or been in certain violent experiences, they'll live with a level of PTSD that is completely undiagnosed. They
Mhm.
won't know exists.
Yeah.
but it will affect them and how they think and how they move and how they see the world and how they think the world sees them and where they do or don't go and all that sort of stuff. It will definitely affect them. And what's interesting now is there are a lot of people who have lived a certain life beforehand who are now speaking up about what their experiences were and how it's affected them. So I would say that that was probably a big part of my life, and that I think did shape a lot of my 20s.
Mm-hmm.
I think I responded in a way where I didn't get involved in that world. I wanted to be successful.
Yes.
So that kind of drove me to work very hard in what I
Yeah.
was doing.
Yeah.
And my revenge, if you like, was success.
Yes.
I've always had a hardworking upbringing. My dad was traditional Caribbean man,
Yeah.
so he was big on having fun, and
Yeah.
we used to have parties in the house, and it was all good. But work, hard work,
Yeah.
respect,
Yes.
those things were non-negotiable. So
Right.
I learned hard work from a young child. Seeing my dad working
Yeah.
hard, but I had a paper round, probably at 13, 14 before school. I did that for years, and I delivered the local paper when I was 15 on a Friday, and they deliver a massive truckload of papers to your house.
Yeah.
As soon as I had a national insurance number, I had a part-time job in Iceland.
Mm-hmm.
I've worked all my life and worked very, very hard in all the things I do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's definitely from my mum and dad, particularly
Yeah.
my dad as well. He was massive on taking advantage of opportunities that he didn't have.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was big on me and my sister. No matter the outcome wasn't necessarily the thing. How well we did wasn't necessarily the thing. It was how hard we worked.
Yes.
And it was making sure we maximized our potential.
Mm-hmm.
That there was no scope for not doing that in my
Right.
house. So I've always had that work ethic, which over the years actually hasn't worked for me.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's led to burnout in recent years and I've had to
Yeah.
readjust some stuff. But I'm very thankful for that.
Yeah.
I think the ability to hard work is a skill,
Yes.
an important skill to have.
Yeah. So, as a psychotherapist, I listen a lot to what is said by my clients, the words they use. So that's why I asked you when you mentioned threat, and you kind of passed on, and I wanted to bring you back. So we might be doing a bit of that here today. But I really want us to now get to what has led you to where you are now, to the Elliot that we know now. And I know that there is a lot now being said about Black women and trauma during birth. And so I want to applaud you as a Black man who's come out to talk about your experience as a father and the trauma and how that has affected you, and you've used that for to pioneer, to change. I think I read something where you're a social changer, and so let's talk about that now. About you were expecting, you and your wife was expecting for the first time. I can just imagine the joy that surround that, and all the things that comes with that. So take us from there, what happened, and if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. So we were married for a year, and
Mm-hmm.
we said in that first year of marriage we're going to have loads of fun, and we did. We traveled the world. We had great times.
Yeah.
And then we started trying, and it happened very quickly. My wife was pregnant, and in general, the pregnancy, as pregnancies go, was pretty smooth.
Mm-hmm.
Don't want to speak too much for her, but there
Yeah.
wasn't loads of ups and downs. It was generally okay.
Yeah.
No major problems. But then about 2 weeks before the due date, we got a letter through the door that said that they'd found an infection called Group B strep, GBS,
Yeah.
which is actually quite common.
Mm.
Quite a few expecting mothers will carry this.
Yes.
And so they found that, and we got this letter through the post, and getting a letter like that when you don't know what this GBS thing is, it was quite worrying, because we were thinking, what is this thing? And obviously you start to Google, and that makes it even worse. Googling things is the worst thing you can do sometimes.
Yes.
It gives you the worst case scenario. So we booked an appointment. We went to see the midwives, and they kind of reassured us. They said it's quite common. You'll get intravenous antibiotics during childbirth, and it will be fine. So we were assured, we were okay. So on the Saturday morning, my wife starts contractions. We go to the hospital. Eventually, we're put in this, really, really nice birthing room. I remember it had lovely music, lovely white walls, a bath in one corner.
Yeah.
Beautiful, like comfy chairs to sit down on, amazing. And they start to give my wife the antibiotics through intravenous antibiotics. So all's going okay. And then quickly they can see, blood pressure changes, heart rate changes. And they very quickly take us from that room into the main ward.
Mm-hmm.
And over the next 20 hours or so, there were a couple of moments where the midwife would push this big red button, and all these doctors would come running in, and they're checking our baby's heart rate and my wife's blood pressure and all this sort of stuff. And it was very surreal, because I was thinking, where are these doctors coming from? The nurse is just pushing this button, and all of a sudden everyone's running in and seeing to my family. And then when my daughter's kind of finally 24 hours later ready to come out, the delivery is quite difficult. They end up using a ventouse on her head to kind of pull her out. And when she does come out, she's like very gray in color, and she's not breathing. And my wife at the same time is bleeding out very, very heavily. So they lay her on my wife's chest. They notice she's not crying or breathing. So they pick her up, put her in a side room. And there's one particular doctor who's using a straw to kind of suck fluid out of her airwaves and try to resuscitate her and get her breathing again. And on the other side of the room, my wife is bleeding out very heavily, and there's blood all over the floor and whatnot. So at this point, there's maybe 6 or 7 doctors around my wife and 6 or 7 doctors around my daughter. Eventually, they get my daughter breathing again, and they put her into an incubator. And I remember feeling like I was it wasn't my life. Like I'm watching this, like it's a TV program, or like I'm watching some CCTV footage. Like is that feeling where you genuinely feel like you're having an out of body experience, and this is someone else's life, and you're watching a film or something.
Because while you're talking, I'm thinking, I'm seeing your daughter, your wife, and you in the middle, in the middle of all this trauma that's going on, a threat to your wife's life, your daughter's life, and you not knowing what's happening or what to do.
Yeah. And it's a moment you can't really prepare for. And I think it's difficult with expectant parents, because even though we know, particularly for Black parents and Black mothers, the 1 in 5 or likely to die during childbirth, we know that exists. And for parents in general, it's a hard balance of preparing people without scaring them. So I find for a lot of expectant parents, they're not so aware of some of the complications. Things have changed. I think now there is more awareness, but definitely in 2015, there wasn't much conversation around this at all. So I went into it very prepared about what my role was going to be during childbirth, because we did hypnobirthing. And hypnobirthing was incredible in terms of me having a role and breathing exercises and feeling like I knew what the birthing plan was. I was writing the birthing plan with my wife, so I was fully involved in the birth, but we weren't prepared for any complications, to be honest. So it was the shock of, I didn't know this was a thing. I had nothing in my mind beforehand led up to that moment. So it's that kind of trying to understand what's going on, and then in the moment thinking, this can't be real. Surely this is I must be dreaming or having a
Yeah.
nightmare. This isn't real.
Mm.
So one of the nurses, the doctor said to me, do you want to stay here or do you want to go to NICU, the neonatal intensive care unit? My mother-in-law was there, so I left my mother-in-law with my wife and I went to the NICU. And I remember them having her, wheeling her, my daughter, really quickly in the incubator, and me just following behind and walking through the hospital. There was a really long corridor, and it was all
Mm.
white. And I got my phone out and I tried to call my mum. Now, I don't generally just call my mum randomly. Like, I speak to my mum, have a great relationship,
Yeah.
but I wouldn't just like, oh, pick up and ring my mum. But it was, I felt like a child at that time.
Yes.
I felt like I needed just someone to tell me what to do.
Yes.
So I tried to call her, but unfortunately, there was no reception in that part of the hospital. So I put my phone back, and then we went into the NICU, and we got into the NICU. And if people have been there that are listening, you'll know there's lots of different incubators with babies in the NICU, and the parents will be there. So this is around 6 o'clock in the morning. Got into the NICU, and this nurse looked at me, and she looked at me in the eyes, and she was like, "You got to come back into the room. You're a dad now."
Right.
And
And
that kind of
although
woke
you
me
were
up.
in the room physically, what
Mm,
she was seeing that you had become absent in,
yeah,
yeah,
I wasn't there.
yeah,
And she kind of I don't think she had her hand on my shoulders, but I felt like she did.
yeah.
I felt like she had her hand there. I felt like she was shaking me. I don't think she was there, but she was looking at me saying, "You need to come back into the room.
Mm,
You're a dad now."
mm.
And those words were so powerful. And that's
Yeah,
exactly what I needed.
you're a dad now. The responsibility starts here.
Starts here. There's no, oh, tomorrow. It's like, as soon as that baby comes out,
Yeah,
you're a dad now.
yeah.
And that was exactly what I needed. It kind of just woke me back into the moment
Mm,
to be like, oh, actually, I am responsible for this baby.
yeah,
Yes, you are the medical professionals,
yeah,
but ultimately, this is my child. I
yeah.
need to know what you're doing. I need to be involved in their care. I can't be a passive
Yes.
passenger in this.
Mm,
So they explained what they thought it was and what they were going to do. And then we went into this side room, and this side room was incredible. And I think about this a lot in regards to what's going on a day-to-day basis that we don't know about. So we went into this side room, and all the parents at about 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, they all gather in this side room. And then one by one, they're taken for their own consultation,
mhm,
private consultation with their baby in the NICU. It's just them and the doctor. So we go into the side room, and I'm with about 15 other parents. And they can see that, I'm knackered. I've been up for like 36 hours at this point. I'm just a shell of myself. I'm not completely there.
mm,
And those parents were speaking so much life into me and supporting me and encouraging me and ultimately saying, yes, of course, you can be upset, but you need to be on top of what's going on. And
yeah,
they were talking through their own plans for their babies and what illness or sickness their baby has, some premature babies, some heart problems, GBS,
mhm,
loads of different issues. And I think about the hospitals around the world and around the country. At any given day, there will be parents in that room
yeah,
having those
mhm,
conversations while we are walking past, oblivious to what's
mm,
going on in those rooms.
mm,
And it was a really special.
yeah,
I wish I could keep in contact with those parents.
yeah,
So we had our private consultation, and over the course of the day, my wife was receiving treatment. And eventually, at the end of that day, so Sunday evening, my daughter was born on Sunday morning. Sunday evening, we eventually got to take her out of the incubator. Um, and I feel like I held her on my chest, skin to skin, and she opened her eyes and looked at me. And I felt like that's when she realized she was born.
mm,
And that connection was just incredible.
yeah,
It was amazing.
mm,
First time kind of getting to hold her. But as it was, yeah, dads, for right reasons, aren't allowed to stay on the ward. So I had to go home that evening.
mm,
My wife was in a wheelchair. She went back into her maternity ward, and I went back into into the car and kind of drove home. And I remember opening the door. The house was really cold. It was October. Going up into my room, getting into bed, and just thinking, wow, I didn't think I would be doing this.
Yeah.
I didn't think I'd be coming home on my own
Alone.
in a
Mhm.
cold room,
Mm.
getting ready to go back to the hospital the next day, not knowing what's going on. Luckily, after 2 days, the hospital gave us a room. I think it's just a lesson of being nice to people.
Yeah.
You're a nice, friendly person. So they gave us a room in the hospital. I was going to say hotel then. It wasn't a
Yeah.
hotel, in the hospital. And we got to stay in that room, all three of us. So it was next to the NICU. So 3 times a day, my daughter would go to NICU for antibiotics. My wife was getting treatment as well, and I was able to stay in the room. And so for 2 weeks, we were in that room, and lots of ups and downs. Some days we had good news, some days bad news. But ultimately, the doctors and nurses knew what was wrong, and they were pretty confident it was going to work out okay, even though there was risk factors, and it's a very
Yeah.
serious infection. 1 in 10 babies die. Another
Yeah.
1 in 14 have a serious lifelong disability. But they knew what was wrong. They knew how to treat it. They'd seen it before. So for us and for me, I think I can held it together. After about 10 days, when we got the good news, finally the infection had gone, my daughter developed a bump in the back of her head, like right here, a very big bump, about the size of a golf ball. And that's when the doctors got very worried and concerned. So they
Mhm.
started sending in specialists from other hospitals. They sat us down, they prepared us for all eventualities. They didn't know what was wrong. So we were booked in for an MRI scan the next day. And that night was, by far the most difficult night of our lives. We prayed all night. We had a midwife called Nagme, a Muslim lady who came and joined us. And we just prayed for 6, 7 hours and we cried. First time in my adult life, I'd cried,
Mm.
you know, tears just coming out. We were just exhausted. We knew that next day is going to change our lives one way or
Mm.
another. The results of this MRI scan are going to change our lives one way or another. So we stayed in the room all night. The next day, we go for the MRI scan. We go back into the room. And what was funny is that in our room that we had, the doctors wouldn't knock on the door to take someone for treatment. They would just burst in. So they just burst through the door.
Yeah.
So we waited for that burst through the door and it came. And the nurse had her hands out like this, and gave us a massive hug. Like they were basically family by now. We'd lived with
Yeah.
them for 2 weeks. So we knew them very well. They hugged us
Mm.
and they said, it's bone structure, nothing to worry about. It's going to go down. You can go home. Amazing news. That's the news we wanted.
Yes. Amen.
Amen. So we went home. We had a weekend as a family. My mother-in-law came and stayed with us for a little while. We had a couple more. I had a couple more days off, but then my paternity leave would finish.
Okay.
So
So
after
let
three or
me
four
so let me
days,
so let me stop you there.
hmm,
Wow, what a story. And so I'm stopping you because I want to check in with you.
hmm,
So you've just um, retold something that you've
hmm,
experienced, and I just want to check into where you are, how you're feeling,
hmm.
having said all that, and being reminded as you talk about
Yeah, it's a weird one because it's kind of become part of my work.
it. Mm.
So even though a few years ago I was talking about it a lot, so it was 8 years ago now, nearly
Yeah,
9. It took me a good few years to actually talk about it in this way.
yeah,
I wasn't able to for the first 3 or 4 years,
yeah,
but then I feel like I spent a couple of years talking about it a lot.
yes,
Um, if you like, I was maybe one of the faces of male postpartum mental health,
mm,
so I was talking quite a lot about it. Nowadays, I don't so much.
mm,
Um, for a couple of reasons. I think I've my story's there, so people will be aware.
mm,
Um, and also, I think the work has become actually bigger than me.
mm,
So sometimes when these movements, it does start with your story, and then it becomes the bigger thing.
yes,
And so I think now there's a lot of power in me also talking about the bigger thing, which we're going to as well.
Yeah.
So I feel okay. It was years ago. I do therapy once every other week.
Right.
Um, I've accepted what happened. I'm completely okay with it now. In some ways, it's easier for me to talk about it because there's a reason.
Yes.
And I feel like I'm in a privileged position in that way where it's for a purpose,
Yes.
whereas not everyone's in that situation.
Yeah.
And I remember when I first shared my story, actually, one of my friends said to me, why? Like, why did you share it? And at the time, didn't understand, but now I kind of understand why. Because I think for a man and a black man to share that story so publicly, if it doesn't become something off the back of it, then you just shared your story and everyone knows about you.
Right.
Whereas for me, it became something.
Yes.
So there was power in it,
Yeah.
and it's aligned with a level of success, if you like.
Yeah.
So I understand my privilege in being able to share my story is because of a reason.
Yeah.
Whereas for some people, obviously it's really good and we advocate for sharing, right? But
Yeah.
on a platform like this, for example, for
Yeah.
someone who doesn't have a public profile or isn't doing
Yeah.
work in this space, it might just result in everyone just knowing their business, if you like, So yes, for me it's okay, it's therapeutic now. It doesn't bring back difficult feelings. Obviously it can be moments where like it's so vivid, right? And I'm talking about the walls and I'm talking about trying to call my mom, and it does kind of bring back
Yes.
where I was.
Yes.
But I feel like I process it so much now. It does feel a little bit like I'm speaking to a previous version of myself.
Right. Yeah.
Rather than speaking about who I am now.
Yeah. And there's when I as I listened, I just so much vulnerability there for me when I listened to you, in going through that, and the sense of you wanting to, the first person you wanted to call as you're going down the corridor was your mum. What came to my mind was this sense of containment and the role that our parents or grandparents play when a child is coming into the world, is there to help contain and to offer that support. And you went to your mum, and as you said, you felt like that child again, seeking out your mother, the comfort, because it was such a distressing time that you were going through.
And you
Extremely
hear that,
distressing.
I've heard about people who have maybe died by violence, and their last thing is like, I want my mum.
Yeah.
You know, um, grown men.
Yes.
Their last thing is, I want that comfort.
Yes. Yeah. And what was also interesting when, you know, when we started our conversation, you told me about what you experienced in your earlier years of this threat to life. He was a threat to life again, this time the life of your family, your wife and your daughter, both, struggling, and you not knowing what the outcome would be. And I wonder if there was any triggers there for you at that point.
I think there's definitely feelings you go back to of helplessness. I think
Yeah.
of a real sense of your mortality and the mortality of the people around you,
Mm.
and situations where you have a lack of control about the outcome.
Mm.
And they can be very tough moments, when I think all of us, we like to have some form of control over what's going to happen. When you're in a circumstance where it's not up to you,
Yeah.
what happens, it's difficult to contend with. And I think that's where faith comes in.
Mm. Yeah.
That night when before the MRI scan, we've never prayed as hard. Because at that point it's literally like, I can't do anything here, right?
Mm.
God, you've got to step in
Yeah.
because I have nothing else
Yeah.
to give. I'm done trying to be strong and try and hold it together. Like at this point,
Mm. Yes.
so
So,
it's
so now we're here.
Hmm.
Look what I have.
I love it.
This, this amazing book. And talk to me about the platform now because of that experience, how you are using what's happened, what your experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, I want to take us back to that, leaving the hospital, having a
Yes.
few days, and then doing what a lot of dads do is going back to work,
Yeah.
and going back to work, being a shell of myself. I was having like panic attacks in work meetings, being on the train just in tears, so tired at the end of the day to get up and go home. Insomnia, staying up all night, me and my wife just talking about the birth over and over again. We went to A&E on a weekly basis for about 2 months, looking back for no real reason other than just our paranoia about our
Yeah.
daughter's birth. And I remember some of the faces of the doctors as we entered A&E for the fourth time in a row, and their look of concern, like, "Oh,
Yeah.
these guys are back."
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
um, throughout that period, what I what I needed in a such a period of uncertainty, not understanding my own emotions and what was going on for me, and why I'm this new person who's just crying and like panic attacks and all these thoughts and anxiety, like trying to figure out what was going on. What I valued in that lack of control was something I could actually dictate, and that was writing.
Yeah.
I started writing about being a dad, and I tried to do it in a creative way where I would bring in music and football and intertwine that with ideas of fatherhood. So I started a blog on New Year's Day 2016 called Music Football Fatherhood. And it was literally just, okay, what can I control? I can write, this blog, 400 words every other day and just put it on a website. And I think for that gave me such a sense of like grounding
Mm.
and control. And it really helped in this chaos.
Mm.
Like having that was amazing. It
Yeah.
was my own form of therapy. I wasn't talking too deep about what happened or what I was going through, but it was a kind of, okay, cool. I can put some of my thoughts somewhere and that can build and I can control when I publish. And I started tweeting about it. And it just gave me a sense of home, if you like.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was really nice. And I think it was just started with literally my own therapy, really. And so over the year or so, I reached out to another few dads and they got involved. So they started writing about stuff. And then it kind of started to grow and people were like, oh, this is actually quite cool. So going back to like being a hard worker, started to learn how to code a little bit, do some design, and just basically set up this blog called Music Football Fatherhood. Kept on going, started to think about how else could we engage dads in in-person meetings. How can we share more stories? How can we use social media? And we tried a lot of different things. We ended up catching the radar of um of the Independent. So what happened one day, I was in Harrow in a coffee shop. I had a day off, a week off work, and my wife was off as well. And I was writing about my experience at the time being a black dad. I worked compressed hours. I had my daughter on a Friday. I would take her to play groups. So I started writing about that, and I wrote like a blog about it, a long form blog. And my wife said, "Oh, this is really good. You should send it to someone to publish it." So she somehow found the details of the Independent and one of the editors from the Independent on Twitter. So I sent it to them. They responded back straight away, literally within like 5 minutes. And they were like, "We love it. Want to publish it?"
Wow.
Bearing in mind, at that point I had no dealings with the media. I knew nothing about that world. They asked me for a picture. I sent them a picture, and by the time I got home from the coffee shop, it was published on the front page of the Independent website. By the time I woke up in the morning, it had been shared 17,000 times. This is in 2017. So it went viral.
Yeah.
And from there, we had loads of different dads, a lot of Black dads reading it, saying, "Oh, what you're doing is amazing. I want to be involved." So they got involved and started building a team. We had about 20 at the time. A lot of the people are still with us now. And there were contributors and volunteers who would share their stories and help with what we were doing, which is great. And then a few months later, a very famous person had a baby, and he posted a picture on Instagram of him with his baby and spoke about childbirth. And that same independent editor said to me, "Do you want to respond?" And I was like, "Okay, cool. I'll write a piece about childbirth and this guy's Instagram post." I did that. Went to bed. They published it. In the morning, my phone was going crazy. I had loads of missed calls, messages. I'm thinking, what have I done? What have I said? What's happened? I checked my phone, and the same person had shared my my article on Twitter. So I went downstairs. I said to my wife, "I was like, guess who shared my article?" And she was like, "I don't know, your friend Jermaine." I was like, "No, your dad." I was like, "My dad's not on Twitter." I was like, "Think bigger." She's like, "Barack Obama." I was like, "Nearly." And I got up on a chair and I did the signature wrestling
Yeah.
slogan.
Yeah.
If you smell
Yeah.
it, basically, if you know wrestling, you'll know that's The Rock, Dwayne The Rock Johnson.
Yeah.
Had
Wow.
shared my post, and he had, he was, I think, the most followed person on Twitter at the time in the world, one of
Yeah.
anyway. So that again, and things like that were happening. The
Yeah.
BBC called us the mums for dads. All these things were happening, which I believe was God telling me to keep
Yeah.
going.
Yes.
And even that very first independent article, it was such a surreal experience writing it, because I don't actually remember writing it, to be honest. I remember starting it and ending it. I don't remember actually writing it
Right.
at all. And I wrote it very quickly. And I believe God was saying, "Elliot, this is your purpose. This is what you're supposed to do with your
Yeah.
life.
This is your calling.
This is your calling." So all these amazing things were happening, which were unbelievable. Like, who has The Rock sharing their work? Who has, a viral piece that they wrote in 5 minutes? It's just all these things were happening, which I couldn't explain.
Yeah.
At the time, I was working in the civil service. I was head of race equality at the DEFRA. I had a people-based job in DFT, ended up in the Treasury, head of inclusion at the Treasury. So I had these busy jobs, and I was doing music, football, fatherhood kind of on the side. But these things were happening to say, I think this is what you're supposed to be doing with your
Yeah.
life, and it kept me going, even when I was very, very busy and parenting and work. It was these amazing things were happening, which were keeping me going. And then it came to the pandemic. Before the pandemic, I had this idea to create the book Dad. And I approached an agent. I had 10 offers from agents, which is, unheard of.
Mhm.
I met an agent, and we approached publishers with the idea of Dad. All the publishers said, "We love what you're doing. We love the writing. We love the stories. It's so needed. But because you're not famous and no one knows you like that, no one's going to buy the book." So my agent at the time was like, "Elliot, you got to get famous then." I was like, "What do you want me to do? Like, go on Love Island? I'm married. Not going to happen." Like, it's not that easy. And also the
Contact
point
the
of
Rock.
yeah. And the point of it is that actually it's not about famous dads. It's about
Yeah.
everyday dads.
Yes.
That's the whole
Absolutely.
point of the book. So anyway,
Yeah.
changed my agent, went out to publishers again in 2020, and they said the same thing. "We love it, but no one's going to buy it." So I decided that we're going to self-publish the book. I knew how to get the book professionally edited and manufactured and distributed, because I met a lady called Stacey at work a few years ago who used to work in publishing. So she kind of guided me through the process. I knew how to get this book into WH Smith and Waterstones and Foils. I knew how to do that. We launched a crowdfunder September 2020. Within a week, we had raised £10,000. Within 10 days, we'd raised £14,000. And so we knew that was the sign. We
Yeah.
knew the book was going to be successful, because people gave us £14,000
Yeah.
to make a book, right?
Yeah.
Individuals just
Yeah.
donating their own money. So the book came out in May 2021. I was working at the Treasury at the time. I left my full-time job to do this full-time, because I knew that there was a space for what we were doing. I knew I had to dedicate more time to promoting the book if it's going to be successful. And I thought, I've been doing so many things working flat out. I need to actually take a leap of faith in myself
Yeah.
and do this full time and see how it goes. So the book came out. Within a week, it was an Amazon bestseller. It was used by government officials to influence government policy. Lots of NHS trusts will use it to engage dads through the maternity process, and it's one of the resources they'll recommend when a dad goes for an appointment, when the family goes for a scan. It ended up being in the BBC staff room one day, and a producer called Zach saw it. He got my number somehow. He called me up and said he wants me to present a documentary to tell my work and my story and my life and what I'm doing. I was like, "Who are you? This must be a prank. Let me see some ID." I saw some ID eventually. He was actually who he said he was.
Yeah.
And we made a documentary called Becoming Dad.
Yeah.
That was on BBC One prime time in January 2022. They replayed it again later that year. It ended up being one of the most watched documentaries, one of the most 20 watched documentaries across the whole BBC network that year. And I think it's because it told a story that so many dads, I speak to a lot of dads, so many dads experience, but there isn't the language or the space or the conversation in the mainstream to talk about it. And that documentary, you know, it was up with Louis Theroux, and Mick Jagger had a documentary at the time. It did so well, and it was one of the most watched documentaries. They played it on BBC Primetime twice in the year. And through the experience of the book and the documentary and the work I was doing for Music Football Fatherhood anyway, you know, I'm lucky enough to now be doing this advocacy work full time in the last 3 or 4 years. I'm really, really busy. Been lucky enough to grow my organization where we partner with some of the biggest football clubs in the world and in the country. We do online group therapy. We collaborate with some of the biggest brands to do really cool experiences for men. You know, in November to October, we're doing collaboration with Estee Lauder to do hair care sessions for Black dads. I've been able to travel the world to all over Europe and overseas talking about my work, and launched a new campaign called Parenting Out Loud, which has been featured on Loose Women, on the news. It's part of the Royal Foundation work, Princess Kate's work around building a better future. So all these incredible things have happened off the back of you know, a very traumatic experience that helped me to really grow as a person, I guess, you know, grow as an individual, and then realize that there are so many other men who need this.
Yes.
Well.
And once again, I want to applaud you as a Black man, that you are pioneer, you pioneered this, and look where it's taken you and where it is going to take you. I was in conversation with a good friend of mine yesterday in the States, and we were talking about birth trauma. And we thought about the many women, Black women, who face a lot of birth trauma. And no one has ever thought to think about the fathers who are present during the birth, watching this. As you mentioned earlier on, you said that, you know, your wife was in one part of the room bleeding out and your daughter on the other side, and you're there as a father. And so this has happened time and time again, and nobody's ever thought to think about the vicarious trauma of fathers. And so I applaud you again for stepping up and using this very traumatic experience to make a change.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I think there's reasons why, because I think, you know, it's only in recent years that men have been involved in childbirth. You know, when our parents were young, when our parents were born, I should say, it's very unlikely that their dads were at their birth.
Absolutely.
You know, that changed in the kind of 70s, where dads started to actually be in the hospital, and then they were in the delivery room, and then they were there for the birth. But that happened gradually. And now I think about 96% of dads are at the birth of their child. I think even just research around mothers' mental health is
Mhm.
relatively new,
Yeah.
you know, maybe decades old. It
Yeah.
isn't a
Yes.
thing we've lived for a while. And then looking at the intersection of Black mothers,
Yes.
again, that's even more,
Yes.
recent.
Yeah.
So fathers, I think, have been further down the line in regards to looking at their experience. And I understand that it's been an evolution of what childbirth looks like and who's in the room and who we have to prioritize. Of course, we have to prioritize the mum's physical and mental well-being. Like that is first and foremost, and
Yeah.
the baby as well. Alongside that, I think we've understood how important dads are to the family throughout the whole child's life. And those early kind of months are very important,
Most
and
definitely.
where dads can feel alienated from the whole process,
Mhm.
that can lead one of the big factors for postpartum mental health
Yeah.
depression in mum and dads is
Yeah.
lack of bond with the
Mm.
baby.
Yes.
So many dads, they feel alienated from that process. Sometimes it's not on purpose by the
Mhm.
mental health professionals and the maternity professionals, I should say. They are just prioritizing the mother.
Yeah.
But the services have been built that way, and the dad can feel like a third wheel in his
Yeah.
own family. And then when we're looking at statutory paternity leave, which is 2 weeks,
Yes.
so there's so many reasons why a dad can feel not involved
Mm.
in that process, and that can lead to him not building that strong bond with his baby
Yeah.
and not understanding his baby and not feeling like his baby loves him
Right.
and not knowing how to bathe his
Yeah.
baby or how to bond with his baby or
Yeah.
respond to their cues.
And also why some fathers become jealous of the baby because of the attention that's taken away from him to the mother, to no the mother to the baby. So there is all that comes into play there.
100%. When you haven't got a child and you're in a relationship,
Mhm.
you are each other's,
Yeah.
right? Like you are each other's. And yeah, shit, I mean that in terms of body and
Yeah.
mind.
Yeah.
When a baby comes along, now that priority shifted.
Yeah. Your
So the
world changes, isn't it?
world
The
changes.
world changes.
And if the mother's breastfeeding,
Yeah.
and they're at home and you're at work,
Yeah.
they're understanding each other, the bond, and
Yeah.
the mother then kind of starts to obviously naturally control the home and the household and how things are done and where things are,
Yes.
and that dad can come home and easily feel like, oh, actually, can I touch that, or
Yeah.
do I change a nappy in this way, or
Yes.
where do I go for this and where do I go for that? And don't get me wrong, dads need to lean in more as well. This is
Yeah.
a two-way thing. It's
Yes.
not just the system is bad.
Okay.
Dads also need to do all they can to be present and active and involved, definitely as well. And we advocate that and we support dads to do that. But at the same time, understanding the lack of paternity leave, the lack of some of our NHS trusts in setting up systems that proactively engage dads in the process can lead to that jealousy,
Yeah.
that lack of bond, that feeling of alienation from the
Mhm.
family, and that can lead to postnatal depression,
Yes.
but also other worrying behaviors, suicidal ideation, or even
Yes.
anger,
Yes.
domestic abuse as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So it's
Can
really
I?
important to engage dads, and that looks like understanding their mental health journey as well, and making sure they've
Yeah.
got a role to play in childbirth, making sure we are assessing and thinking about their well-being and their mental health through the whole process too.
So, so my platform, Restore Black, is looking at focusing on Black mental health. So, what would you say in words of encouragement to Black men and Black men, Black fathers regarding taking care of their mental health?
I would say it's got to be your priority,
Mm.
your number one priority.
Yes.
And that can sound counterintuitive when you've got a job and you've got family and but it's everything.
Yes.
If we are not well in our mental and physical health,
Mhm.
it's very hard to do everything else. I had a period in 2019, 18, 19, and I was working really hard, like going back to that hard working thing. I was working really hard and music football fatherhood was going great, and I was really busy on that side of things. I was at a busy job as a head of race at DEFRA, so I had a senior, high pressured, high visible job there. Super involved dad. So I was busy, and I wasn't taking care of myself really. I wasn't sleeping very well. I'd put on a lot of weight. My diet was rubbish. Wasn't exercising at all. Didn't exercise for about 2-3 years, really, at all. But I was pouring myself into my work, and I was like successful in regards to achieving things in different elements of my work. And my family was good, and I was a great dad and whatnot. But I wasn't looking after my mental or physical health at all, really. And I started feeling really dizzy. I started feeling really, really dizzy to the point where I would be walking down the road and then feeling like I'm going to fall over. And I need to sit down. And it's a really weird feeling of like, why am I feeling like dizzy? And then it got so bad. A couple of times I called A&E and I was like blue lights to the hospital, and they thought like I'm having a heart attack or something. So anyway, I went for loads of tests and they couldn't find anything. And I went for my GP one time, went to my GP, and they did some scans on my heart and chest and all that sort of stuff. Anyway, so I went about my business. I actually found out that I had been nominated and shortlisted for a United Nations award. I found out I'd been shortlisted when I was at my sister's house one day. We're downstairs. I got the email saying I've been shortlisted for this award by the United Nations, and I'm over the moon. Great, amazing. A couple of hours later, I'm upstairs in the bathroom, and my GP calls me and says, Elliot, those tests we did, we think we found something wrong with your heart. You have to go for an emergency appointment next week. We think we found something called left ventricular hypertrophy, which is where the left side of your heart gets really big. It's working too hard, ultimately. So I go to Hammersmith Hospital the week after, and I'm worried now. I'm thinking I've got a heart condition, checking my life insurance. I'm panicking.
Yeah.
I don't know what to think. I'm on the way to the hospital, feeling dizzy. Sit down. The heart specialist gets this machine, puts it over my chest. Straight away, she says, Elliot, there's nothing wrong with your heart. You're fine. But then she says, tell me about your life.
Yes.
And I tell her about my life. And she was like, you're stressed.
Yes.
Like, you're stressed. And I was like, but I didn't feel stressed. Like, I didn't feel worried about anything. I was quite excited about life. I was looking forward to things. I didn't feel stressed. I didn't have thoughts of worry. But she was like, you're stressed, right? You've got all this pressure. You're turning up every day at work. You've got a very visible job. Like the Permsec was my countersigning manager. I did loads of cross-departmental things, very, very visible. You're doing this stuff in the media with your parenting platform. You're daddying, and you're not looking after yourself. You're stressed.
Yes.
And I was like, yeah, maybe I am stressed,
Which is a killer.
Yeah, stress is a killer. So when COVID happened, it was probably the first time I think in my life I actually slowed down. And I remember sitting on my sofa, it was maybe June 2020, sitting there and just thinking, for the first time in my adult life, I don't care. Like I don't care. I don't care about achieving anything today. I don't care. And it was such a freeing, it was such a freeing experience to be like, I can just pause and just be and not expect anything of myself or others, and not have to do anything today to work towards what I want to achieve, And I think that kind of Black man or Black person work twice as hard, achieve. You're coming from this economic environment, that was always been in me, as well as being an ambitious person anyway, and an excitable, high energy, looking for opportunities person anyway. So all these things meant that I was always on 110%.
Right.
And I think if COVID hadn't happened, I don't know, it sounds dramatic to say I don't know if I'd be here, but I think the way I was going in 2019 just wasn't healthy, I've always been slim. I was way overweight.
Yes.
And I weighed myself for the first time in maybe March 2020 and realized I've put on 3 stones.
Right.
Yeah. Like I've always been a slim person. How am I this overweight?
Yes.
And it was because I was neglecting my health.
Yeah. And do you think, as a black man, and you and me both as black individuals, I remember being told that because I was black, we had to work twice, three times, four times harder in order to get somewhere. And I wonder if that was playing silently in your mind, this hard work, and what was the hard work or showing up for work hiding for you? What was that? So sometimes when individuals become workaholics, there's an avoidance of something.
Definitely. I think I definitely had that
Mm.
that messaging. My parents didn't actually say it to be fair. Not that I can remember anyway. Maybe
Yeah.
they did. I don't remember them saying you have to work twice as hard. I think they just showed me that you have to work twice as hard. Like
Yes.
they never said it to me, but
Yes.
they were signaling that definitely. And again, hard work is not a bad thing, right?
No.
Like drive and ambition is good, and diligence and discipline is really, really important. But I think there can be a level where it becomes toxic and unhelpful and harmful.
Yeah.
And especially when it's rooted in I need to be excellent to prove my value. And the only way I'm going to be accepted is by being excellent. Like I posted about the Euros and the England penalties the other day, and like all the black players, and Cole Palmer's mixed race, I'm including him as well.
Yes.
And I posted on LinkedIn about it. I was like, those players went up to take the penalty knowing that they have the pressure of taking a penalty for their country anyway. That's pressure. And then they know if they miss,
Yes.
they're going to be judged differently, racially abused, etc. And I said, this is what a lot of black people live with at work. And it's part of the reason why our parents told us we have to work twice as hard.
Yeah.
Because when we are excellent, we may be tolerated, accepted, even celebrated.
Yes.
When we're not excellent, we know we're judged differently.
Yes.
I remember being in the civil service, and I was quite a junior grade at this time. So I didn't have the power. I didn't feel like I had the power to say anything. But there was a kind of annual review that goes on. So I worked for the Director General. So I would be kind of oversee this process of the annual review, and every director under him, every director would do the process for their team. So this one team, finance actually it was, say we're about 100 people in this unit. And the way it worked at the time is that there had to be some people performing at their level, which is acceptable, a percentage of high achievers, and there had to be a percentage of low achievers. There had to be, because they're looking at it as comparative who's performing well. So there's the bottom 10%. Anyway, there was this one lady a white woman, who was in the team, and she drank a lot. She was an alcoholic. She wasn't turning up for work. And when she was turning up for work, she wasn't very good. And I remember them deliberating about what mark she would get. And they came to the conclusion she should get the box mark 2, which is the you're meeting your objectives mark, because she was good before, and she's going through a difficult time and all these sort of things. I thought, wow, okay, fair enough, whatever. Then they're discussing the box 3, which is the lower performers, and there was a black guy who everyone knows gets involved in extracurricular activities, is very friendly around the office, seems to be okay at his job. I didn't know ins and outs, but seemed to be okay. The director managed to make a case for him getting a box mark 3. I remember thinking to myself, this is really interesting, because you've got a guy here who's visible, who gets involved in the activities, who's great to have around, is, far as we know, doing okay in his work. He's a box mark 3. You found a way to put him in box mark 3. You found a way to put this other lady who's an alcoholic, I'm not saying it's her fault, but she's not coming to work. She's not even here. Like, how is she a box mark 2? And for me, I remember sitting there feeling like I couldn't say anything, because these people are way more, at the time, more senior than me. But thinking, this is how it happens. And this is why when we're excellent, we might get a box mark 2. When we're excellent, we have to be exceptional to get a box mark 1. To get in the top, we have to be like undeniable. So my approach has always been like, I need to be undeniably good. And throughout my civil service career, generally I would get box marks once, because I was undeniably good. but that comes with
a cost.
a cost
Yeah.
of having to be undeniably good all the time.
Yeah.
Of course, you want to be great at what you do. Of course you do, but it's unsustainable for that to you to live with that all the time.
Yeah.
We need to make space for like black mediocrity as well, you know,
Yeah.
as well as black excellence.
Yes.
Like being average is okay sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes, don't get me wrong. I want to be great most of the time.
Yeah.
But if I'm average sometimes, like I have to give myself grace because most people are. I heard the other day getting a first at uni is 70%.
Yeah.
70% at university gets you a first.
Yeah.
But we sometimes think like we have to be 100% to get a first.
Okay.
And actually, a first is 70%. So yes, we have to work hard. I think just as people, it's really good to be interested in learning and strive to be your best. That's very important. Just I think that's a great trait to have. But balancing that with reasonable expectations of yourself, understanding that you have to prioritize rest and friendship.
Yes.
Right, got to prioritize friendship and well-being. Since COVID happened, since I left my job, my lifestyle's completely changed. I go to the gym 3 or 4 times a week. I'm lucky enough now to be able to afford a very nice David Lloyd gym in Bushy. It's amazing. There's a spa. It's incredible. I obviously work for myself, so I can work from there as well. There's a shared working space. My daughter does her activities there as well. My wife goes to, it's our home away from home, and it's changed my life completely. You know, in terms of my well-being, my mental health, my fitness levels. It's been a game changer, but I had to leave the corporate world to be able to do that. When I left the civil service, I was in the treasury, and you know, the manager at the time, the expectations from the team were just unrealistic. We were still in COVID, and the expectations were so unrealistic. Deadlines of tomorrow, no real empathy for people who have caring responsibilities or disabilities or anything that might mean they can't meet these stupidly high demands. And for me, it was like, I need to get out of here. And so when I left my job to do my thing full time, there was 2 reasons. The second reason was to pursue my work around fathers and the advocacy and the writing. The first reason was my own mental health and well-being.
Right. Yes. Amen to that. Because you have to be able to take care of your mental health, because you have to show up for your daughter. And I see your wife just.
Yeah, she's going to Manchester.
Hello.
You can say hello if you want.
Hello.
She's in a rush to get her train.
Yeah. Well, Elliot, I want to thank you again. And so how I found you, forgive me, I had not heard of you before. I will say that up front. But how I found you, I was looking to do a blog for Father's Day. So I get on the computer, start Googling, and then I came across you. And then I just kept looking at your videos. And I'm thinking, wow, I got so engrossed, I forgot about the blog. But what happened? What happened in reading about you on your website? And I've written it down. It said, this is what it says on your website. It says, hello, and thank you for your interest in working with me. I am looking forward to talking to you and seeing how I can help to support your goals and aspirations. And I thought, he's talking to me. So let me email him and let him know I want to work with him. I'd like him to come on my podcast and see if he answers. Elliot, I sent you a LinkedIn and you responded straight away and then told me that your assistant would be in contact with me. And the same day your assistant contacted me and we set up this appointment. So thank you, because you didn't know who I was. You know, I launched this project just in Mental Health Week in May, and wanting to do podcasts to focus on Black mental health, and I thought you would be a good person. Do you know that this is my very first podcast,
Oh, amazing.
and you are my very first guest?
I'm honored. Do you know what? I'm going to keep it 100% real.
Yeah,
Um, I get a lot of requests to do
yeah.
stuff,
Hmm.
and I say no to about 90% of things. I say yes to the 10%. First of all, and I'll be completely honest,
Yeah.
when they are Black people,
Yes,
I will do everything I can to give my time.
yes,
Um, if they're not, but I can see they've got something like established
yeah,
and it's a mutual beneficial,
yeah,
I'll do that. But when it comes to like stuff like this,
yes,
if a Black person reaches out to me, I'll always try and prioritize it,
yes.
and do it
Oh,
because I understand, right? I
yeah,
get what we're trying to do and what we're
yeah,
building, and I think there's so much power in us like connecting and sharing and helping each other. And that's how we
yeah,
build community.
yes.
But I also know when I started years ago, whether it was writing or reaching out to someone for a conversation or a podcast,
Mhm,
there were a few people that said yes to me
mhm.
who probably didn't like need to because
Yeah,
they've already got their thing going on. They
yeah,
didn't need to say yes, but they said yes.
yeah,
And I just understand how much encouragement that gave me.
yeah.
So there's a guy called Leon Mann, and he
Mhm,
runs the Football Blacklist. He does amazing work in football. Like he's actually
mhm.
the guy when it comes to Black
Yeah,
people in football.
yeah,
He has an organization called BComs, and they support young people into sports media.
mm,
Like he's a lot. He's done a lot, right? Amazing guy.
mm,
And when I first launched, he said yes to come on my podcast. He was one of the first guests.
mm,
There's another guy, Zion Richards. He's a music manager. He manages Wretch Free 2 and other
mm.
big rappers. He said yes. And it was like those people that said yes at the beginning who didn't necessarily need to, but just gave me an hour of their
Yeah,
time. Like it just helped me so much.
mm,
And I'll forever, you know, be grateful to them for just
yeah,
spending an hour because it
yeah.
gave me. So, and I understand now I'm in a position now where me spending an hour with someone might give them that as well.
Thank you
So
so
for me, it's
much.
about that.
Thank you. Really, really appreciate that. I thank you from the bottom of my heart because this is new. We're starting up, and thank you and for what you're doing. And so I saw your wife there, so do give her my regards and thank her for her amazing strength too and what she's gone through. So what I will be doing is this going to be a three-part because you start off with you. And then next week, I'll be interviewing somebody called Davina, talking about Black mothers and their experience. And then the third interview, I'm going stateside to interview an African American male doula.
Okay, cool.
And he became a doula because of his own postpartum depression after
Interesting.
the birth of his first child.
Wow.
And
That's amazing.
so he's also using his experience of mental health to change things.
Yeah, I'd love to
And
see that.
yes, I will certainly send you the link, and it will be on my website. And so, before you go, is there anything else you'd like to add before you leave?
Yeah, I just want to say that, I do so Music Football Fatherhood is the community for dads. We do extra time events. There are events in football stadiums. Hopefully we've got one coming up with Arsenal again this year,
Yeah,
hopefully.
yeah,
We do online group therapy called The
yeah,
Lodge. It's with a registered therapist. He's actually lives in Canada, Black
mhm,
guy called
yeah,
Michael Fofeya Poku.
yeah,
So he facilitates those sessions. They are monthly, they are free. We have a blog with loads of articles, and we have other kind of ad hoc sessions we do with dads, like Dads Do Hair. So there's
right.
gonna be information about that Estee Lauder collaboration coming out soon. So that's on the Music Football Father side of things. On my individual kind of Elliot Rae website, I do a lot of work supporting organizations
Mhm,
to support dads to kind of redefine masculinity and male allyship to improve
yeah,
men's mental health. And we launched a campaign called Parenting Out Loud. A lot of people would have seen posters around Euston and Victoria and Waterloo stations on the London Underground. We had a billboard in Hammersmith as well. So basically, the Parenting Out Loud campaign is supporting organizations to encourage dads to be loud and proud about
yeah,
parenting responsibilities at work, because we know work is such a big barrier to dads being involved in the family, to looking after their well-being. So it's a massive campaign that's really took off. So people can go to LinkedIn, follow me on LinkedIn, Elliot Rae, and you'll see just loads of information about all the stuff we're doing.
Yeah.
Our book, Dad, is, I would say, incredible. There's 20 stories that dads have shared.
Yes.
Is very,
Beautiful.
very emotional.
Beautiful book. Beautiful book.
Yeah, very emotional stories,
Yeah.
from stillbirth to co-parenting to widowhood to postnatal depression to gay fatherhood. There's so much in there. Black fatherhood. There's so much in there.
Yeah.
So yeah, check out the book and check out our documentary, Becoming Dad, on our website as well. But yeah, thank you, Audrey. It's been really nice. It's been like therapy. I can see why you're a therapist, because you've got a very, very nice way about you, which encourages people to open up.
Okay, thank you. And so let me just check in with you before you go. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling great. Summer holidays start tomorrow, so no school runs for a few weeks, which is great. Okay. And I'm actually going to Rotterdam on Saturday with my best friend.
Yes.
For a reggae festival. So yeah, I'm feeling really good.
Really. Okay. Well, great. Thank you again for accepting my invitation. Really appreciate it. And thank you for just being so gracious.
Thank you. I appreciate you as well. Thank you for having me. It's been great. I loved it.
You're welcome. Take care.
Take care.
Hello. As you watch or even listen to this podcast as you go about your daily task, I want to ask you to please like and subscribe to this channel. Not only will your support help us reach more people, but it will help us to get more funding to help with our other community initiatives, which will then enable us to reach more people and encourage them to make their mental health a priority. Thank you again for listening.